and he sees people getting up to head for lunch, that he's probably gone way too long. So we will see how that goes. I will try not to take up the full hour of the session we had this morning with my talk. I usually set a bit of a timer. So if you get buzzing up here, it means that's my own warning that I've gone long. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going a little bit more general than some of the detailed technology presentations you've seen this morning. I think the technology is wonderful. It's an essential tool in everything we do. But I think it's one of the things I have found over the years is that you can put in all the most expensive technology, all the most expensive monitoring equipment, but if the facility doesn't maintain it, doesn't manage it, doesn't manage their entire facility from an odor perspective, you can still get odor complaints and not figure it out. The sad bit is, or the unfortunate bit, I guess, somebody yesterday said they were a reformed engineer. I too am a reformed engineer. Not all answers in this field are engineering solutions. A lot of these are just straight how to deal with people, how to deal with your plant staff, how to deal with the issues that arise on the plant. One of the nice things about being sort of having a lot of gray hair and having been around a lot, you get lots of little stories to talk about. So I'll sort of scatter a few of those through with some of the things I've seen over the years, just to sort of put things in context. I was talking at break to somebody, and we were talking about, what I was going to talk about. He said, well, I'm going to talk a bit, the back part of my presentation, about best management practices. And give an example of a facility we were working at about 7 or 8 years ago. They called up my company, it was AMEC Foster Wheeler at the time. They said, we need your engineering group out here, we need to design an odor control system for our plant. We know what we need, we know where we want to install it, we have a rough idea what our budget is, get out here. So I was involved with the permitting on this. I went out to chat with the plant manager and the operations manager, and I'm wandering around the plant, trying to figure out what's going on. I looked at him and said, so what really are you after here? He says, well, the odors coming out of that stack are getting complaints from people behind the facility here, of course, right up against the residential community. So we're walking around the plant, I'm walking around outside, and we're walking past a couple of garbage bins that are out there. This off-spec product, which is going out the garbage bins. He had 3 or 4 of them out there because he didn't want to have a truck come in every day to pull out a garbage bin. The unfortunate reality was it was starting to go rancid and rotten. And the real problem he had was his garbage bins. He didn't want to see that, he didn't want to hear that. He was convinced, because he'd already got the budget for a $20 million expenditure, that he needed to spend the money. He said, let's try something. Let's get your garbage guy in, 1 bin, get it replaced every couple of days. His odor complaints dropped by 95%. Needless to say, my engineering colleagues at the company weren't real happy with me. They were all set to start doing a fairly major engineering project that then vanished. But again, it goes back to, it's not always the problem that we think it is, or that you initially think it is. We got to think these things through. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on just a couple of other observations. We're going to talk a bit about, we were talking yesterday in one of the presentations, we were talking about, Elizabeth was talking about odor standards around the world. Let me come back to that a little bit. Those are nice numbers to have, but again, I'm going to challenge you and say, that's the engineer in us that wants a number. We want a hard number to say we are done. Not always the answer. And then just to wrap up with some miscellaneous thoughts. One of the things I've known over the years, working in odor for way too long, not in the 1960s, because it came from other people. Back in the 60s, we seem to be dealing a lot with rendering. 70s, pulp and paper. The 80s, an ongoing wastewater, municipal waste. 2010, doing a lot with composting facility, what we call green bins in Ontario. What do you do with the organic recycling? What do you think one of the big issues we're dealing with over the next few years is going to be from an odor perspective? Anybody want to guess? Anybody come from Colorado?
Marijuana.
Yeah, I heard the answer out here. Marijuana facilities. Believe it or not, the odors that come out of marijuana growing operations is horrendous. And it's not your normal smell of marijuana that we're talking about, somebody smoking this. What plants themselves throw off a hell of a lot of terpenes and cause huge odor problems. So I'm actually dealing with a couple of facilities in Ontario now where we're trying to wrestle with odor issues from medical marijuana facilities. Kind of a neat thing to talk about. So let's step back for a second. What is it we're really dealing with? Let's just say that we're not dealing with an issue of health impacts at this point. You've got health impacts, your odor levels are so high that you're into hitting toxicity thresholds, you've got a whole different set of other issues. What we're really dealing with here is nuisance. And nuisance goes back a long way. You go back into the 12th century, there were nuisance in English common law, embezzling public funds. Having a tiger pen next to a highway, not something we deal with on a day-to-day basis, but you can see how that would have been a nuisance back then. I like the last one, subdividing houses to the point where they become over-pestered with pool. Those were all nuisance ordinances back in the 12th century. In the 14th century, we started to send it out to air and water pollution. Noxious trades to be public nuisances, unpleasant vapors usually arising from pollution. Typically these days, we will have something called nuisance or adverse effect laws. I pulled this one out of Ontario, one up in Canada, and these were pretty standard around. Elizabeth had a number of these similar ones. But some of these are very hard to deal with. Somebody says loss of enjoyment of normal use of property, interference with normal conduct of business. There's no black and white number that's going to tell you what the answer is. These are the sorts of things that you, unfortunately, when you get to them, is something that you need to deal with the legal system, unfortunately. It becomes a what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. The challenge, of course, with odor, and I'd extend that to noise, it's a similar sort of situation. Everyone out there is their own monitor. They walk around, they're mobile monitors. They're their own data recorder, they remember things. They all are different calibrations, sensitivities are different. Some people are more sensitive to odors than others. And of course, everybody has their own alarm setup. It's different for different people. The things that would trigger a alarm to me would be something different from other folks. I think we all agree that something like sewage sludge odor is probably a noxious odor. For me, the spiced cilantro is something that I really dislike, partly because of a bit of bad fish in Peru one year that was heavily spiced with cilantro. I smell cilantro now, it still brings back bad memories. I'd rather live next to it. Let's say I'd rather live next to a sort of food plant than a cilantro facility, but I'm quite sure I'd go quite that far. So how do we deal with this as a standard? You know, we've gone this route a number of times, and you know, Elizabeth did a great job yesterday of summarizing a lot of different odor standards. I'm not going to repeat them here. But what's one of the big challenges that we have with all these? The challenge is that if the regulator puts this in regulation, does it mean that you are safe from a nuisance effect or a nuisance attack from the public? We're dealing with a sugar refinery in Ontario a number of years back, and there was some development encroaching. And initially one of the fears was that they would get in their permit a 1 odor unit 10-minute standard. We talked about it a bit, went back to the regulator, and flat out said, guys, we can live with 1 odor unit in 10 minutes. You can put that in the permit. But what we want from you is then in the cover letter or in the permit to say, if you can demonstrate we meet that 1 odor unit, that you will hold us harmless from adverse effects findings if somebody complains. Anybody want to guess what the regulator said? They said no. They basically said, well, we put the 1 odor unit in, and there are complaints, you're still going to be on the hook for adverse effects. So effectively, the battle was, well, why bother putting it in then if you're not going to hold us safe? And I think that's the issue with pretty much all of the adverse effects or odor unit numbers that Elizabeth was showing yesterday. Unless you've got a regulator that's willing to say, if you meet this number, we will not find you in violation of an adverse effects ruling, the number really does not meaningful. Not from an enforcement perspective or a regulatory perspective. Extremely useful if you want to get into looking at these things for impacts. Certainly you're doing some modeling, some assessments, and you're measuring or modeling 60 odor units, you know you're going to have a problem. You're modeling something around 1 or 2, we're in the gray area, you may or may not. I've heard people say, well, why don't we set odor similar to a toxic standard? Well, we actually had some people go through that exercise a number of years ago. Some of the toxicologists from our ministry started muttering about this a little bit. And those of you who are familiar with sort of toxicology, you've got something where you expose people, you expose animals to different doses, different levels, and you find 50% effect level. And you say that's my EC50. Not a dissimilar curve that you get for odor, but again, you do an EC50 based on an odor unit. What's the concentration of that? But now let's go a little bit further. We follow this through as a toxicology. A little bit too much on the slide here, but typically what they will do is toxicologists will look for no effect level. So they'll look at the bottom end of that curve. They'll then usually throw in a safety factor of 10 for a sensitive individual. And then they'll set the appropriate averaging time. So we do the same thing on the odor unit side. And I take the 50th percentile on one odor unit. I apply the sensitive population, and then do some adjustment for, say, going from a 10-second to a 1-hour averaging time. I would end up with a standard of 0.002 odor units. Now that probably, if you went to a toxicologist, would be the odor number they come back with and say, if you had that, you can be absolutely sure it's going to be no impact. They don't think we need that or want that. So that's not going. So we're going to deal with this in a lot more. Oh, just one last thought. Good idea for me to throw. Always a puppy slide is always cute. This was our golden retriever about 12 years ago. Mind, a lot of the toxicology studies are done with odors, with animal studies. Would we really want to set a odor standard based on animal studies? I don't think so. So let's talk a little bit more about how we really deal with odor. We talked about it already with some of the presentations over the last few days. Distance is always a good thing. Lots of people set minimum zoning distances. We always fight over those then. We encroach in those zoning distances, what's appropriate. You get into the fights of, I was there first. You end up in hearings, you end up dueling experts. Problem is, mostly regulators we deal with at least don't comment on specific zoning proposals, so you're left with, well, they sort of give some general guidance, and now we need to sort of figure out how to deal with it. And then you're stuck with the aftermath when the regulator says, well, we're not getting complaints. You should never have allowed that in the first place. Certainly, lots and lots of facilities, certainly the ones we're dealing with, moving much more towards a complaint basis. If you get complaints, you have a problem to deal with. Some of them go as far as to say, if you get X number of complaints in X time, well, you have to deal with it. Of course, that's a challenge as well. You know, the one person who launches 32 complaints a week versus 32 different people launching complaints a week. Again, the regulator has to show some reasonableness in having to deal with that. Even seen some where, for example, Allegheny Mountain or Allegheny County requires that if you've got an odor issue for specific facilities, you need to have a thermal oxidizer with a half a second at 1400 degrees F as your control system. Again, that's fine if the regulator will then say, if I still get complaints, I've complied with the law, don't find me for an adverse effect. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about pest management plans. I talked about the guy who had the waste bins and having the problems with that. That was a problem with his managing of his odor sources. Recently, we talked about working with the sugar refinery. Again, over complaints around the refinery, over issues around the refinery. We went on site, started to poke around. Sure enough, the raw sugar coming in, smell the raw sugar when it comes in. They process, basically what they do when they process sugar is they dissolve all of it, crystallize, and then recrystallize it in pure form. There's odors in that. What we couldn't figure out was some of the odors we were smelling off-site weren't the same odors we were smelling inside the facility. So we got up on the roof. Well, not surprisingly, it's a sugar facility. They handle a lot of dry sugar in the end. Some of the sugar was getting out of their stacks and falling on the roof. After a rainstorm, you got water with sugar. The microbiologists in the crowd know exactly what goes on after that. Local medium for growing all sorts of nasty stuff, fun stuff, and that smelled quite nicely. Probably need to have a chat with the fellow who's talking about probiotic materials yesterday in terms of managing this. But it's a relatively simple and straightforward, guys, get up in your roof once a week, have a look around, are there puddles, is there stuff growing in the puddles, take care of it. Again, one of those things, not rocket science, but is it hard to get a facility manager or operations manager to really deal with that kind of thing? That's not the sort of thing, they think it's a maintenance issue. But the maintenance guys aren't really involved with dealing with the odor complaints. So you get into a real sort of challenging situation with a lot of this. So let's talk a bit about what we've been doing with best management plans. One is you need to have a good understanding of the odor sources. You need your normal emissions. You need your point, your fugitive emissions. You need to understand what changes in the process that might change the emissions. Does cleaning of a resin bed cause a sudden odor issue in your sewers? It only happens once a month, but it could be pretty noxious when it does happen. Not something you see on a normal walk. Are there things that could cause odors? Storage piles, how long are they sitting around? Your waste bins. Of course, everything we've talked about over the last few days, continue to talk about estimating emissions, measuring them, modeling, on-site surveys, all that stuff, extremely important in trying to understand the significance of what you're doing. What you need to do is document if you've got current control practices, if you've got thermal oxidizer and scrubbers. How are you managing your odorless materials? What procedures do you have for length of storage? What procedures do you have for cleaning? Is it good cleaning? All that's extremely important to capture the best management plan. You need your people to be trained. It surprises me how often I deal with a facility with a thermal oxidizer, dealing with one right now with an incinerator. We're looking at some of their upset conditions where they go outside of their normal parameters, and you poke a little bit below the surface, and you say, so who's operating the facility that way? Who's running the incinerator that way? Who's managing it? And it turns out, well, you know, Joe, who's the normal guy that's trained for this, was away on vacation, so his assistant stepped in. The assistant's never been trained. No idea what was going on. We had one really nasty case 3 years ago, where it was a 2-chamber incinerator. The fellow who was operating it had not been trained. He started the unit up, fed this waste, stepped outside, saw a whole bunch of black smoke billowing out of it. He went in and turned off the fire rate in the secondary chamber, thinking that would fix it. Those of you who deal with those incinerators, that's the absolute worst thing you can do. It's the absolute wrong thing to do. Being never been trained. Again, back to your best management plan. You need to have all that documented and maintained. Complaint procedures, another area that a lot of facilities do not like dealing with. Your operational folks, your plant manager, they don't like going out and having to deal with the public, especially if the public is complaining. Yet, it is so important. Being able to manage your neighbors, talking to your neighbors. I'd like to say that, you know, usually within about 15, 20 minutes of meeting a plant manager who's got an odor problem, I can tell you whether his odor problem is real or not, or whether he's dealing well with his people or not. The ones who don't deal well with odor complaints, don't work well with their neighbors, are usually the ones that immediately start saying, But we get these complaints, these people are all wrong. We don't know what they're talking about, or it's not us. They take that kind of a defensive or hostile attitude, we're pretty sure they're gonna have trouble with their neighbors. The neighbors aren't gonna be very happy. We've talked a lot over the last few days about things like ambient monitoring networks, work with the neighbors, awareness campaigns, awareness campaigns, predictive odor modeling and assessment. We've seen a couple of good presentations today with Rubik's in terms of having to do those things. Those are all very useful and excellent things to be doing if you've got these kind of issues. So just a few observations, conclusions. It's always going to be a challenge. I think that's what, I guess this is one reason that I really like about working with odor, is the fact that never a simple answer. It's always a complicated situation. A lot of this stuff is not rocket science, as I've said. Let's try and avoid pushing towards the numerical standard. It's nice for a planning agency or for the Ministry of the Environment to say, guys, we're going to do this at 4 odor units at 99.9 percentile in the model. That's helpful. It gives you some guidance. But unless they're willing to guarantee that if you meet that they won't charge you with an adverse effect if somebody complains, it's not to be very helpful. And I guess I will just complete my talk by saying, just anything you need in your facility, you need the technology, but you need to have all this wrapped up in some sort of a best management plan to manage your facility. The only way you're going to resolve it. Thank you. That's the puppy now, 12 and a half years old. She still smells flowers when she goes out for a walk.
So you rightly mentioned that we should not go for only numerical standard, but because the regulatory agency does not ensure protection against the litigation. But it is the same thing whether you are dealing with hazardous air pollutants or criteria pollutants. You comply with the permit, but you are still open to a litigation, right?
I don't disagree. The issue is that if it's something like a benzene that's a long-term acting toxin that you're going to get cancer from, you're less likely to get your neighbor to say, I'm having an effect from benzene. They don't smell it. They don't really know they're being exposed to it. Right? It's a lot easier. Odor happens to be something that everybody's got a sensor for. They smell it. They know they're being impacted by it. Therefore, they are going to complain as an adverse effect. Most of the toxics, you wouldn't know. Right? And quite honestly, if you've got a toxic where you're actually smelling it, you've probably got a bigger problem than an odor problem with most toxics.
But I was thinking in terms of legal protection or regulatory protection, there is no protection as such. In both cases.
No, it's fair enough. If you get into a legal hearing over your emissions, the toxic emission, for example, and you do your stack testing and you say my benzene at my maximum point of containment for modeling is 10% of the standard, the regulator will say you're compliant in the discussion. Right? Because it's not that somebody's saying, well, I couldn't use my property, therefore I had to go indoors.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing is that with all the cancer incidences, etc., then a source may still be subject to litigation.
I don't disagree. I just think we see more litigation on the nuisance side from people complaining than we do on the, I've been living next to the facility for 100 years and I've got cancer.
But good, excellent presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome to go back to your clients and your folks and create BMPs, right? Please.